Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Returning listeners, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So, you're going to love our guest today. She is a great lady. Love her message. So, she started a business that teaches people FIRE, which is financial independence, retire early. It's not about, hey, you have to retire early. The whole point of this is to take control of your financial situation and build the financial plan that works for you, your family, and the people important to you. And she's overcome a lot of obstacles. She's going to talk about kind of how she got from where she was to where she is now. Her and her husband paid off a tremendous amount of debt in a very short period of time. She's going to talk about how she did that. And she just is such a great messenger of personal accountability, personal responsibility, and sharing how she did with her husband and what they've accomplished together. So, without further ado, let's bring Angela onto the program now. So, Angela, thank you so much for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So we had a great conversation. One thing we have in common is we've both lived in Oregon. Angela still lives in Oregon. I was born and raised out there, albeit different parts of the state. So we had a little fun conversation around that. But more importantly, I think you're going to really like Angela's story because her life has followed a path probably very different than she thought it was going to follow. And there's a lot of lessons and learnings in there. And she's going to share that path and those lessons and learnings with us, up to and including what she's doing and working on now, which is a topic we haven't talked a lot about on the podcast. So I've been super excited to bring you on because we have not talked a lot about fire on this podcast. I'm very familiar with it, and I find it very interesting. I have not pursued it, but really excited about you exposing our audience to it, your experience with it, and kind of your tips and techniques for people that are interested in it. So, what we usually do is have our guests start with just kind of a broad overview of their life. And that can be from when you're a kid, from when you graduate high school, wherever you think it's important. But what we do after that is go back and hit the high points in much deeper detail. But if we give the audience kind of an overview, then they say, okay, got it. So we're going to follow this path. And then we go back and do the heavy lifting on the big stuff.
Sounds great.
So with that, the floor is yours. Tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, so let me get started at the beginning. Like a lot of people, my life has had its twists and turns, but I really like to start a lot of my journey or explaining my journey with my diagnosis because it really did shape a lot of my life decisions and my approach to life and just different ways I handle things even to this day. Anyways, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 19 years old, but I've been having symptoms from years prior to that. I think I started having symptoms around the age of 15, 16. I knew that had something wrong with me, but I didn't know what. It took a number of years, yes, to get a diagnosis. So when I finally did get my diagnosis, it was a bit of a relief. And in a sense, it was a confirmation that, oh, there is something wrong with me, like I knew, but now I have an answer to what that problem is so I can do something about it. But at the same time, I knew, okay, this is something I'm going to have to live with. I'm going to have to make special decisions, do different things to accommodate this. And so that was daunting in itself, but it really has shaped my path in so many ways. Anyways, fast forward a little bit. I'm in college. So I was in college when I received my diagnosis, and I always dreamed of becoming a scientist. Specifically, I really wanted to be an astronaut. And that was something that really excited me as a kid. And when I got into college, I knew that I was going to pursue something in science. I didn't know what. I changed my mind a lot. I started as an imaging science major, and then I eventually changed that to a bioinformatics major, which is just a combination of biology and computer science. I realized that I was terrible at computer science and didn't like it. So I ended up dropping computer science. But then I decided for a while that I wanted to do a dual major in physics. But then I realized, oh, wait, if I do the extra major in physics, it means I need to take an extra year of school. And I didn't want to have that much student debt. So changed a lot. But ultimately, I ended up finishing my bachelor's degree in biology. And I decided at that point, I wanted to pursue an advanced degree. I wanted to get either a master's in science or a PhD. I wasn't really sure in what yet, because even in undergrad, I just bounced around all over the place and really just didn't quite know what I wanted to do. So I decided, I'm going to work in the field for a few years, get a feel for what I like, what I'm good at, and then I'll figure it out from there. And I was very glad to have done that, because I did end up taking a very different path, of course. But yeah, I worked in the field for a few years. It actually took me a while to get my foot in the door with my industry, because I graduated during the Great Recession, and jobs were very hard to come by
Mm.
during that time period, not too surprisingly. And I took whatever I could get at the time. I picked up a catering job here and there. I even did some software testing, really anything I could get, because by then my student loans had kicked into repayment, and I was very unprepared to pay them off. In fact, I remember thinking about it and trying to make bills every month. And I realized that I can't afford this. I wasn't making enough money. I didn't have a way of paying all the things I needed to pay, just the basics. I couldn't pay my rent and my student loan and groceries. So I was really struggling. And I had to swallow quite a bit of pride, because I'd always believed that you graduate, you get your degree and you get your job, and you're fine, right? You can pay off your bills. It's no big deal. That was what I believed. So when I found myself in this position of I'm not making ends meet, what do I do? I felt quite a bit of shame about that, but I decided, I have to do what I have to do. I ended up going on to a graduated repayment plan with my student loans, which I took not wanting to, but it was the only choice I had at the time. I knew that in the long run I would end up paying quite a bit more for my student loans doing that. But at the time, I didn't have a choice. It was either that or I defaulted on my loans, because I simply could not afford to pay that every single month. So I did that, and it took me some time to get a job in my field. But when I did, it really did start my track into my career and what I really needed to do with finances, with what I wanted to do in my career, and all of those things. So I ended up working with a smaller lab. I was working as a molecular biologist. And at the time, I had a great supervisor who I'm still friends with to this day. And I was still kind of tossing around the ideas of what do I do for graduate school. I was still very determined, despite how much I struggled with my student loans. I still wanted to go to graduate school. So I was tossing around different ideas, trying to think about what I wanted to do. And for whatever reason, I don't even remember how I got started on this path. I started entertaining the idea of an MBA alongside the master's in science and the PhD. But at the time, it was just this is kind of interesting. It has some potential, but I don't think it's really right for me. At least that's how I felt at the time. But the supervisor really encouraged me to look at it more closely. He'd been in the field for a number of years. And so he knew that if you paired your science background with an MBA, he thought that would be, from his experience, a lot more compelling. It would make me a more compelling candidate for employers for job growth and all of those things. So I started to take it more seriously. In the meantime, I did end up shifting jobs. I worked for a Fortune 500 company as a research and development technician. So just slowly started building on my career. And sure enough, this was a few years into working now. I decided to take that MBA seriously, and I started an MBA program that I would finish 2 years later. Meanwhile, I made another job transition. So I moved from being a research and development technician. Then I became a laboratory manager. So building up my skill set, getting into more senior roles. And I finished my MBA while I was working as a lab manager. And then I started to think about, okay, what is next? What do I want to do? I still had this student debt that I had to pay off that I was very slowly trickling down, but hadn't made any significant strides towards paying off. I was really just paying the minimum at the time. And I knew that I wanted to do more than that. And I started thinking about moving into marketing roles and started exploring, okay, what's possible with that? And I decided that, yeah, this is the direction I want to take my career, that I want to move into marketing. So I decided to start my own company on the side so I could build up my marketing expertise, build in that skill set, and then start making that shift. At the time, I had talked to my employer about doing some marketing work, but with the role that I was doing, there just wasn't flexibility for that. I was effectively a quality control team lead. And so I was very entrenched in the operations and quality side. And there just wasn't room for growth at that time for me to shift into marketing. So I knew that I would have to do my own thing. So I did eventually. I was able to build up my skill set with working with different clients and having my own blog and all of those things really helped get me into that career. And then I made a shift into communications and then into marketing. And then from there, my career just continued to grow. And I had built a really solid foundation for myself in marketing. Fast forward a few more years, I've been building up my marketing career, and I decided, my student debt is this plague. By the time I finished my graduate degree, between my husband and myself, we combined for over $100,000 in student debt. I think by the time we started seriously tracking it, I think we were around 100 and 105. I think was around the time that we said, we're going to do something about this and we're going to get rid of this once and for all. So it was a lot at the time, and we were still building up our careers, figuring out what we were doing. But we decided, we're going to do something about this. I was done wasting money on the interest that I was paying every month. And so we committed to a plan to help us get rid of it once and for all. And it took us a little while to build up some steam and get started, but we incorporated some techniques and some tools. We refinanced our student loans for a much lower interest rate. And by the time we were done, we paid off the last $85,000 of our student debt in just 18 months, which
Wow.
if you had told me at the time that I could do that, I never would have believed you.
Mm.
So it was a journey. It took a lot to get to that point, but that experience really helped me buy into the FIRE movement. For the years prior, I'd been learning about financial principles to help me prepare for this. And after that experience, I felt just so much immense freedom being able to have that money freed up for other things, for more savings, more investments, things like that. It bought us a whole level of freedom that I never would have anticipated. And it made me really that much more excited and passionate about the FIRE movement. And for anyone that in the audience that isn't familiar with FIRE, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And I have always looked at retire early as one of those optional pieces. It's really about the financial independence. It's about learning how to build a life on your terms. Because what financial independence or what financial freedom can do for you is buy you the freedom of choice. You can choose your career or not. You can choose to travel the world, or you can choose to sit on a beach or spend more time with family. It doesn't matter. You're not tied to a job. You don't have to have that income necessarily unless it's fulfilling you and exciting you or propelling you forward with your other goals. But it gives you that freedom to choose one thing or another. So that moment of paying off my student loans was that aha moment of, wow, this is possible. And it's actually not as hard as I would have thought. So that's really where my journey took me. But of course, there were so many things that happened in between each of those stages.
Wow, good stuff. So, love all uh the way you shared all of that. I don't love it all because obviously having Crohn's and having to deal with that is not an awesome thing. But in some instances, like it started you on this path and you wouldn't be where you were if that hadn't happened. So that's one of the things I tell our audience all the time is we're very fortunate. We attract high caliber people on the podcast. So I don't have a lot of bad interviews. We got really interesting people like yourself that are so willing to share what they've learned and help other people out. And I try to show people the commonalities because they come from all walks of life. They focus on all different things. We have people on who are empaths who see other people's energy. Some people are very left brain and scientific. Some people are creative. Doesn't matter. We're agnostic to that. What we want is people who have built a life of purpose, who are willing to come on and share how they built that life of purpose. And they always talk about the hard stuff because it's the hard stuff that made them who they are that generally leads them to where they are. And you've already talked about that. The other thing I noticed that you talked about that we hear from every single one of our guests, and I don't make a lot of global statements, but I'll make that one, is they take action. And your story is filled with action. Anytime you were presented with a challenge or a problem, you took action to try and solve it. Sometimes that action led you exactly where you wanted to go or you needed to go. Sometimes it didn't. But the only way to know is if you take action. And I try to call out those commonalities for our audience because, sitting in your basement and rocking and saying, oh, what should I do about this is not the solution. The solution requires action. And I love in your story how you kind of consistently took action, even if it took twists and turns and took you down different roads and all the other way. But I think that's really important to call out. So let's talk a little bit about Crohn's because we've never talked about it before on the podcast. What is Crohn's disease? Like, what does it affect? What are the symptoms? How does it affect you?
Yeah, good question. So Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disorder. There are all sorts of different autoimmune disorders, but it's one of those things that is, yes, a lifelong condition. And my symptoms can vary. There are periods where I'll go through a remission where I have little to no symptoms, or I'll have periods of flares where I have a lot of symptoms and they get to a point where I can barely get out of bed. It really does vary in severity. But my symptoms can be anything from severe abdominal pain. It's often referred to as the bathroom disorder. You have to go to
Mm,
the bathroom frequently. So, yes, there is truth to that. That's definitely part of it, but there's a lot more to it. It doesn't end there. There's the chronic fatigue, the doing anything takes a lot of energy. There's losing weight was a big one. I know we often celebrate wanting to lose weight. I couldn't control that. I would lose severe amounts of weight to the point that I could not keep weight on. And then that would aggravate my symptoms even further. So, yeah, my symptoms would be wide ranging, but it does have a profound impact on day to day life. Yes, I have to run to the bathroom more often, at least when I'm experiencing a flare. Yes, I have to consider other things like my treatment schedule and doctor's appointments and things like that. And this is a lifelong condition, so it can be debilitating. I've spoken with people that I know have this condition as well. And there's a bit of camaraderie there where we can share those struggles together. And there are some people that they're on their last leg of life. They've gone through all of the different treatments and there's no other hope. They just hope to manage the symptoms the best that they can. So thankfully, I've found myself to be one of those that although I have moderate to severe symptoms, they are manageable with the treatment regimen that I've been on. And I've had some issues with insurance and things like that in the past. So I've had a few setbacks, but as long as I've been on my treatment, I generally do pretty well and I can maintain remission reasonably well.
got it. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. How do they test for Crohn? Like, what's the test to diagnose you with Crohn's?
It depends. So sometimes they can do blood work and see that certain inflammatory markers are high. Usually, though, they do a colonoscopy to verify that, oh, yes, you definitely have this condition. And then they'll usually do some biopsies on that and say, yep, you have inflammation, and that's what this is. So Crohn's disease is one of two different types of inflammatory bowel disease. The other one is ulcerative colitis. And I don't know a lot about ulcerative colitis, but what I remember and recall of it is that it's confined to the colon, whereas Crohn's disease can be anywhere from essentially the mouth to the anus and anywhere
Mm,
in between. I've heard of others having even skin conditions. So while yes, technically it's confined to your GI system, it can expand into other areas or show up as other conditions potentially, or other conditions show up alongside it. So it just depends.
got it. Got it. Yeah, appreciate you walking us through that. And so I'm tapping on your skills here, both as a sufferer and a scientist. So we've we've got a subject matter expert. I try to get as much information from
Yeah,
subject
why
matter
not?
experts as I can. Um, and what are the treatments like? Is it medication? Is it diet? How do you treat it?
Yeah, there's a mix. So I'm on a biologic called Remicade. And what Remicade is really it's a very targeted way of essentially debilitating your immune system. So I am more prone to infections and illnesses and things like that. So I have to be particularly cautious when I'm around sick people, for instance. But what it does is it's an infusion that I get. I'm on a every 7 week schedule right now, where you just go. I right now I have a nurse that comes to my house, which is really convenient. In the past, I used to have to go
Yeah,
to an infusion center, and they just hook you up to an IV. It's a drip that you get, and that's generally what I'm on. So there are a lot of different kinds of IV therapies. There's also different shots, and there's actually new treatments coming out all the time. It's which is really fantastic. I've been on Remicade ever since I had received, or shortly after I received my diagnosis. So let's see, that's been almost 20 years, which is hard to believe. And at that time, Remicade was really the only biologic, the only infusion therapy that was available on the market. And there's so many more treatment options today. And I hear about new ones coming out all the time, which is really great because as I mentioned, was some Crohn sufferers, they struggle to do well on one set treatment and will often find themselves having to shift to something else. So having the availability of different options definitely helps manage symptoms better for more people.
got it. Yeah, great information. Thank you for sharing it. And for the audience, there's your crash course on Crohn's disease. So if you're suffering from any of those symptoms, maybe it's something you bring up with your doctor. So you're welcome. Um, Pivoting from there, I'm curious. Becoming an astronaut is very specific. How did that become your focus when you were young?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, trying to remember, I was really little when I think I saw what astronauts did, or I got curious about astro. I don't remember if there was a specific moment that I saw or experienced, but I remember just being really curious about that. And I've always been a really curious person, just by my nature. So it was one of those things that I saw as just this really cool frontier to be able to explore and do something different and experience science and nature in some ways and in a totally different way. So that's kind of what got me into it. I did realize that once I received my diagnosis that it's very very hard to become an astronaut. So at a certain point, reality set in. I realized that I'm not gonna pass the astronaut requirements, but I can still be a scientist. So that's okay too. Yeah, I can't remember what the specific moment was, but I've always just followed my curiosity. And I've just always been really curious about what it's like to be an astronaut or what it's like to be in space and explore. So just something that always excited me.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. Now, it's interesting because so you followed the science path, but you also were really attracted to marketing. So it makes me curious. Are you a left-brained person by nature? Are you a creative person by nature? Do you kind of split the middle? It's unique, I think, for someone to have such different approaches or
It
different interests.
is.
You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah, it's very uncommon. I have met with a few people in my network that started on the science path and then made a shift into a more creative business pursuit, but it's very uncommon. So I'm a little bit of both. Just funny fact about myself, I'm left-handed, which says that I should be more right brain creative dominant type. But I've always felt aligned with that logic. So I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know that I'm really strongly one or the other. I have that logic piece from my science background, but then I have that creative piece. And I've also really always loved storytelling. That's one of the things that really got me into marketing initially was telling stories. I even self-published my own book some years ago, and I've always really loved fantasy and sci-fi stories. So I don't know, just kind of this interesting bridge, I guess you might say, that I've had between that creative and logic. And it's definitely not a common shift that you see, but something that makes me uniquely me, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. We'll just, you're a feathered fish. That's what we'll call you. You're a feathered fish.
There you go.
So a hybrid. You're a hybrid between several things. I like that.
Yeah.
A good place to be. Um, so you get out of school and the Great Recession is happening. You've got this handy dandy biology degree and no one will give you a job. How, what was your, how'd you fight through that? That had to be hard mentally. What were some of the
What?
techniques you fight through that mentally when you were in that
Yeah.
situation?
Oof, yeah, that was it, was really tough. I had to come to terms with some realities that that this did not fit my expectations, and I had to really find a way to be okay with it because yeah, I felt really ashamed that I can't find a job, I can't pay off my bills. So it took a little bit of convincing from a few friends, to be honest, and a boyfriend at the time that said, you got to do something. And I knew that I did. I didn't want to just sit there and play video games. Like, I'm not that type, anyways. Like, I
Sure.
didn't want to do that. But I did have to do some things that initially I was very reluctant to do. And that was to get a temporary job. I wanted to be one of those that I got out of school and I had a full-time job. I wanted to get into my career and running right away. That's what I was looking forward to. It just didn't work out that way. So the alternative at the time was, okay, well, I'm just going to get a temp job. And I did. So that's where I was taking that range of whatever I could find at the time, anything from some catering work to some software testing. That was one of the more random experiences that I'd had. And it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was the thing that helped me make some money, pay some bills. And I did that for a little bit until actually my first full-time job was doing, of all things, it was providing technical support for Apple computers. It was, if I'm going to be totally honest, it was an atrocious job. It was, it was awful. It was. To this day, I still look back on it as one of the worst jobs I've had. And as a kid, I worked at places like Taco Bell, you know.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, I had my share of some bad jobs, but the full-time job, although it wasn't what I wanted to do, it was something to get me going. It was a more consistent, stable income than the temp job. So it was better in that sense. So, and I got that, I think, a few months in after I'd been working the temp job. So I did that for a while. And then really my first kind of lucky moment, you might say, is I ended up finding a temp job as a lab technician. And I actually got to work in a Coca-Cola. They only needed me for a short time, but I worked in a Coca-Cola plant doing QC testing. And that's when I got the chance to really get my foot in the door, in a sense, to an industry level job. And that was enough to put on my resume to then lead to a different temp job.
Hmm.
That job that I was working at as a molecular biologist with the lab started as a temp job, and then it turned into a full-time job. So I never envisioned myself working for temp jobs, and I had these pre-existing beliefs that temp jobs are somehow less than. But you know what? After experience that, I realized that sometimes temp jobs can be a great foot in the door. Sometimes you just never know where it's going to go. And sometimes too, you just have to take what you can take. It may not be exactly what you want, but just keep moving forward, try something, and eventually you'll get traction. And it took me a little bit to figure that out. But after a while, I did start to realize that, okay, this can eventually lead to something that I actually want to do.
Mm, yeah, for sure. And look, some of those circumstances are beyond your, like, you didn't choose to graduate college right when a fucking huge recession hit, right? I mean,
Right.
like that's not in your it's not your control. You don't have control over that.
Right.
Couple of things that popped into my head while you were talking. So I love the QC thing at Coca-Cola. So I'm in the grocery industry and have been for 30 plus years. And at one point, I worked for the largest grocery wholesaler in the country. That's what I did. That's why I lived in New England, because they're headquartered there. And I ran their private label department. So that is, store brand apple juice, store brand cereal, store brand vegetables, whatever. And so you're responsible, at least I was responsible for everything from soup to nuts, on that, which included the formulations. So, like, I had to decide if our peanut butter should be emulated after Skippy or after Jif. And you wouldn't think that's a big decision. However, Skippy is very popular on the coasts, and Jif
Ah,
is very popular in the center of the country because Jif was actually owned at one point. Now it's owned by J.M. Smuckers, but it was owned by Procter and Gamble. They developed Jif. So they had a big distribution network in the middle of the country. And so people were used to Jif in the middle of the country, and people were used to Skippy on the coasts. Well, I'm a fucking can stacker. I don't know how to formulate peanut butter, but people like you who worked in QC and food scientists, I had a lab in Chicago that I would go to 4 times a year, and they would do quality control testing on our product to make sure that our products were being made to spec. And I'm not talking about they would taste it and say, yeah, it tastes like Skippy. They would
mm-hmm,
deconstruct the product. They would
mm-hmm.
test it for color. They would test it for husks from the peanuts to make, because the peanuts are supposed to be shelled and husked before they're pressed into peanut butter. And there's a certain level of husks that is acceptable to pass
Yeah.
QC. And so it was fascinating. We had a self-rising pizza under our brand. And what we tried to do with our brand was make it a national brand equivalent or better. And so if the national brand in that category, the leader was like DiGiorno, which it was in this case, we would try to emulate their formulation. It turns out that DiGiorno had gone from a true pepperoni to a turkey pepperoni, and we didn't know it. And during the
Ah,
QC process, our QC team said, hey, they're using turkey pepperoni. If we want to emulate the brand, we can, and it will save you cost. So I actually got a cost reduction, which allowed me to sell more pizza because I could sell at a lower price. Um, so there's all these jobs out there that you never think about
yeah,
that people can make, to your point, can make really good careers out of. So
yeah,
it just popped into my head when you were talking about the QC because
yeah,
I'm very familiar. Um, with a QC for sure. And then the second one is, again, you're taking action and you put yourself in a position where a temp job leads you to a full-time gig, which leads you down the path that you are now. So, again, to the listeners, like, you got to take your shots. You don't know where things are going to lead to. You don't know how things are going to work out. You could be sitting next to someone on a plane and have a conversation and it winds up turning into a business deal, which happened to me one time. I got stuck on a plane next to a guy and we got to talking and we wound up doing a real estate deal together because of
wow.
our conversation. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So I love that. So now you're out in the world, your things are going okay, but you're looking at it going, son of a bitch. Like, there's still enough money left at the end of the month, right? I have too much month at the end
Yeah,
of the money. And
yeah, pretty much.
and look, hey, we've all been there. I'll share my little version of fire later on after you cover fire. I don't want to jump in, but I have a small example in my life where I took a fire approach. But uh, how did you process? Hey, this doesn't work. I know we're fast forwarding a little bit. I don't know. Were you married? I know you were married when you made the decision because you said both you and your
Yeah.
husband had the student loan debt. But when you were single, did it occur to you like, hey, I've got to put a plan together to get rid of this, or were you just kind of existing and not like attacking it in a methodical way?
Yeah, so good question. So initially I definitely was just making it happen. And like what we had talked, I ended up being in a situation that I didn't expect to be in. I was having to get those temp jobs. I had to get whatever I could get at the time and then eventually just make things work. And that's still, even after I had gotten into the full-time jobs and everything, it still really wasn't enough to make a significant dent. And it wasn't until really years later that I started making some good traction. I know at one point I entertained the idea of, well, could I pay off my undergraduate debt before I got into graduate school? And I just knew that realistically, with where I was at with my salary and life demands, all of those things, I knew it just wasn't going to happen. So
Hmm.
I decided, okay, well, the good news is that while I'm in grad school, my student loans, good news, bad news, my student loan payments will be paused. So that would buy me time to figure it out, to finish school and so on. Now, the good news in that is that yes, it freed up a little bit more of my income so that I could figure it out and build up some savings, start investing a little bit. The bad news is that interest continued to accrue during that time. It didn't just stop. So, at least not for most of my student loans, because this is before we had refinanced. So, I think some of them, the interest payments stopped, but most of them, it didn't. But, anyways, so yeah, it wasn't until really years later that my husband and I had been together for a few years. In fact, I remember the specific moment where I was like, okay, this is it. I don't want to do this anymore. We were sitting in our accountant's office and we were paying, or we were going through our taxes every year, like you do. And I was looking at a piece of paper that had said how much I had paid in my student loan interest, effectively what I could write off my taxes every year. And by then, we were younger adults and we didn't always make the most responsible financial choices, but we'd been on some cruises and things like that, trips. We weren't making our student loan payments a priority at that time. But the thing that for me was a very big aha moment was when I looked at what I'd paid in interest. I realized, wow, with that amount, I could have afforded another cruise. I could have paid for a cruise
Right.
vacation with what I paid in interest. That's not talking about the principal at all. That was only the interest. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is not something I want to continue doing. I'm not going to pay for a cruise vacation every year with my student loan interest. So it was another one of those kind of painful moments of realizing, oh, what did I do to myself? But also, it was a moment that empowered me to say, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. We're going to figure something out. So it was that moment that we did begin putting a plan in place to tackle that student debt once and for all. It took us a while to get there. It was many years later after I'd been paying my student loans, but I just decided that enough was enough.
Sure. From your perspective, does it make sense to talk about that plan now, or is it easier to talk about it as we move kind of through your journey into the fire movement?
Yeah, we can talk about that plan now because really that was the kind of first, you might say, first experience that I'd had was really testing out some of these concepts. And maybe I'll back up just a little bit. In the years leading up to this event, I'd been spending more time reading different finance books on anything from investing to budgeting to a mix of things. And I'd taken some courses in my MBA program to help with some of this too, things like accounting.
Sure.
So I'd gotten some good foundational concepts, which I attribute to a lot of my success with finances to this day. It's astounding what you don't learn in high school and what just kind of surprises you. Another side story that I'll share too is that, again, a series of dumb young decisions, but I bought a car at one point shortly after I graduated from my undergraduate degree with an interest rate of 20%. It was
Oh, good Lord.
19.95%. Not one of my better moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those where I felt like I needed the car and that was what they were going to give. I didn't think to shop around. You know, you're young, you make dumb decisions,
We've
but
all been there.
you
Yes,
learn from them.
absolutely. Yeah, that's experience is something you get right after you need it. And I personally have a ton of experience, meaning I have fucked up a lot of stuff in my day.
So yes, I didn't just graduate and all of a sudden have this all figured out. Obviously, I made my share of mistakes, but I committed to learning what I could and figuring it out and not continuing to make those mistakes. And I do credit making that decision to spend time educating myself on financial concepts as a really, really important one that helped me get to where I am today. But anyways, so yeah, dumb decisions aside, eventually I did figure some things out. And after that moment in our accountant's office where we realized, oh wow, we're paying this much in our student debt, we started to put that plan in place. So that plan started by, first of all, we started putting together a vision board, which is to this day one of my favorite things to have. And a vision board is one of those no holds barred, whatever you dream of for the future, put it on there. Doesn't matter if it's unrealistic or if you feel like it's not achievable. It doesn't matter. It's your vision board for whatever that is. And one of the pieces of that vision board was we built a chart that showed our student loan interest. And what we decided we were going to do was chart on a month to month basis what our total student debt was. And that in itself was a huge motivator. It really was. And I still have a picture of that chart to this day. Yeah, so that was one big thing that we did. That it sounds simplistic, it really does, but it really did help quite a bit. The other thing we did is we consolidated our student loans. Now, loan consolidation is sometimes a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. In the case of our student loans, it was a good thing because it allowed us to consolidate the student loans that we had that were at a higher interest rate. So my loans range anywhere from, it was around 6 to 10%, to I was able to bring them down to 4% with one
Mm.
loan, with one consolidated loan. My husband didn't have quite as much student debt as I had, so he had a slightly lower interest rate. I think he had 3%. So that meant that the money that we were putting every month into our student loans, a lot less of it went to the interest and a lot more of it went to the principal. So that was one big thing that really helped us. Now, if you are consolidating your loans, whatever they might be for, if it's the higher interest rate, I caution that because it might help you manage the balance every month. But if you're paying a higher interest rate, then it's going to cost you more money in the long run. So yes, I had to do some version of that when I went on a graduated repayment plan with my student loans in the beginning. And you may find yourself in this position. Do what you have to do, but just understand that there is a cost that comes to that too. So I say, and again, I'm not a financial advisor. I say this from my own
Sure.
experience,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is just one of those things that you have to take very cautiously and be very thoughtful about, because consolidation can be great on some sides, but it can be bad on others, depending on the circumstances, of course. So we did that. And then the other thing we did is we started working extra jobs. And this is where I think we could have probably toned it down a little bit. We took on extra jobs, and we were,
Toned it down.
yeah, because we worked some ridiculous hours. It did come at a cost of our mental health. I mean, it
Yeah.
was good in the sense that we were making some good income, and whatever we were making, we threw at our student loans, and
Sure.
we put a ton of money into it. We decided to pay the minimum payment on everything else that we were paying for and just focused on our student loans. But yeah, we were working some pretty ridiculous hours that after a while did start to take a toll. So, it was good in some ways, but bad in others. So yeah, we had to kind of recover our mental health in some senses when we did that. So it was a bit of a journey itself, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the good news is that we did that. Those were the key things we did. And towards the end, yeah, we paid off the last of our $85,000 of student debt in just 18 months. And it was astounding what we did. And if you look back at that chart that we had, at first it starts really slow. It's, maybe we trickled it down, the total balance down by $1,000, I think, the first few months or so, but then it just started to go down so fast after that. So the other thing that really helped us was just incrementally improve what we were doing. Just pay a little bit more, work a little bit harder at this job, and get a little bit more, within reason. I think we crossed into territory that was a little unreasonable at times, but it did pay off in the long run.
Yeah. So you talked about working the side jobs in your primary career. Both you and your husband, in your primary career. Were you advancing? Were you making more money in your primary field as well as the side jobs during this period?
So we'd gotten some income increases, and this was one of the things that I did in my career as well. Is that I got good and I learned some good techniques for negotiation for your income. So I did get good at that. Whenever I would take a new job, I would negotiate with that employer for an income that I was happy with. And I got pretty good at that. So that did help. So in our primary jobs, to some degree, yes, we were able to do that, at least from the income negotiation side. And then we also took other additional part-time jobs in addition to that. So my husband is in mental health. He's a psychologist. And so he took up some extra counseling jobs. He was working a side job for a while at the hospital, and he'd work at the crisis center. And that was one where he could, if someone wanted to get rid of their shift, they might give it to him and he might pick it up depending on what he had available and things like that. So he would work extra hours that way. And then I did a similar thing with my own business where I was working with clients and I could pick up extra clients here and there as it made sense. So at times we were working some pretty ridiculous hours. So yes, we gained income increases in our main jobs, but then those side jobs helped quite a bit too.
Sure. Yeah, I just was curious um, if that was helpful. I know that's one of the things you talk about on your website is, find a job, advance your career,
Yep.
hold the line, and sock away the extra money. And in your instance, it was yeah, look, you got to get rid of debt if you're truly going to be financially free, plain and simple. Like you can't owe people money because like you just you don't have freedom. You just don't. You're beholden to that debt all the time for sure. So at what point in this process did you start the fire business?
Yeah, so that one I started, let's see, it's been 2.5 years. I think I started the platform, and ever since then, it's been a really fun journey. I post all sorts of tips and tricks that I've learned on my career journey and with my finances, like salary negotiation is one of those things I talk about. I also talk about ways to get started with investing and things like that. So yeah, I started about 2.5 years ago. And really what my goal is to inspire people to live life on their terms. I truly believe that the world would be a better place, that people would be happier and they would treat each other better if everyone had the ability to live life on your terms. It does require commitment. It does require sacrifice. And yeah, it's a lot of work. It's not a journey that's easy to go on. It takes time, it takes dedication. You're not going to see overnight success, but the rewards are immense. And I've seen people go on this journey and be able to achieve this level of freedom in their lives. And they're just so much happier. They lift up the world in a different way. So that's what I aim to do is I aim to make fire more achievable for people. You don't need to win the lottery. You don't need to have a relative give you a ton of money. You don't need to start a business, even unless you're really passionate about that. You don't need to be super, super successful in these crazy ventures. You can simply build up a very traditional career, see income gains, live below your means, make smart investing and budgeting choices, and you can achieve financial freedom. I've seen people do it on teacher salaries, on janitor salaries. I mean, there's all things that you can do. It helps if you can get to that higher income, but it really is a balance. There's the income piece, and then there's the debt piece, and you have to find some balance in that and find a way to live below your means. If you're living at or above your means, it's going to be very hard, impossible, really, to achieve financial freedom. But it's finding that balance that will get you there.
Yeah, you're much more polite than me. If you're living above your means, you're fucked. Like you have to fix it. It's plain and
Yeah,
simple. So here's the
yeah,
analogy I use because so I'm not fire in any way, shape, or form. However, I've always been pretty smart with money and pretty frugal. I use the analogy of raise a bridge, lower the water, right? So there's a flood coming,
there you go.
and to survive, you have to do one of two things. You have to either raise the bridge, which is make more money, right? If you get the bridge higher, then you have room for more water to go underneath it. And lower the water is reducing or eliminating expenses. And
I like that analogy.
yeah, in an ideal world, you'll do both because it gives you the maximum amount of flexibility to survive the flood that is
Definitely.
coming. Yeah, that's the way I try to explain it because people can visualize that better than this existential live below your means. It's absolutely the truth. It's absolutely right. However, it's hard for people to visualize. Like,
I'm going to
I
borrow
hate
that. I like that.
you can have it. Absolutely. Yeah, you can have it. I hate cars. I've always hated cars. They're depreciating assets. They're necessary, but like I fucking hate cars. My wife loves cars, and so we've had all sorts of crazy cars. I've had a Porsche, I've had a BMW. We now have one car, even though there's two of us, and I paid cash for it. And like, I don't know if I could stomach a car payment ever again in my life. I hate them so
Sure.
much.
Yeah.
Because like, again, necessary. And you know how I judge my cars. And by the way, I've got a similar story. I paid for a warranty on the first car that I bought. So don't feel bad about your your 20% interest. I bought a fucking car warranty on my first one. So you're not alone. Um, but yeah, it's I judge them on a cost per mile basis. Like whatever the lowest total ownership cost is, that includes oil changes, that includes maintenance, that includes repairs, that includes tires. Like I try to say, okay, if we're gonna buy a car, and by the way, we drive a 2019 Hyundai Santa Fe. That's the car that we have. So, um, I want the lowest cost per mile. It's funny because I got a buddy that worked at Goldman Sachs and he retired not through fire, but because he made a shitload of money. So kind of fire, but like it was hard not to. He had a lot of flexibility. Let's just say that. And I'd never talked to him about it, and I told him, and he goes, "That's exactly how I look at cars too." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And but it was a funny conversation. Um, but so on the fire, let's talk the fire approach first. Well, let me ask you, should we talk about your particular business first? Or you want to talk about the fire approach in more detail first? Which one makes more sense?
Yeah, let's talk about the fire approach because it's one of those that can feel like a very big, daunting thing. And I want to make it more accessible. I want to explain that there's so many subtle levels of fire. It doesn't have to be the big hoonie necessarily. It can be. But yeah, let's get into fire principles first.
Cool. So if let's just say, let's create a hypothetical situation. I am a 28-year-old person and I have I don't own a house. I'm renting an apartment. I own a car. I have a car, but it's got a car payment. I have $20,000 in student debt and I make $50,000 a year. And I'm interested in understanding the fire cost. These, I'm making all this shit up. So if you want to change it to
Yeah, yeah,
whatever you want. I don't care.
sure.
Um, how would I start? How would I start thinking about this? Let's start there. What mindset do I need to have?
Good question. So I'd say the mindset that you really need to start with is start with curiosity. Start with, okay, what does this mean and what could it mean for me? That's where I started, and I think that makes it more approachable. If you're first learning about this, it can feel like a big foreign concept when you're starting to just figure out what it means, and it can feel impossible. You might start to get into the numbers and start to think, oh, I'll never make that, or I'll never have that investment. So take it simple, start slow, and just see where your curiosity takes you. If you learn about fire, or maybe start with what does fire mean, or what does financial freedom mean? And that's what I was hinting at before, is that there are so many different levels of financial freedom. There's anything from, hey, I just paid off this debt, or I have this much income, or I'm living this much below my means, so I have an extra $50 a month to do whatever, to I'm retired, I have 5 million in my investments, I never need another job, I can do whatever I want whenever I want. And there are so many levels in between that. And what really matters most is that you're choosing a path that is aligned with your vision for the future. And this is, again, going back to the vision boards.
Mm.
This is why I really love vision boards, because if you're not thinking about this, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to understand. This is what it means, what financial freedom means to me. In my dream life, I would spend 50 hours a week on this passion project, or I would see grandma every day, or whatever it is. There's so many different versions of that. And what really matters is that you are thinking through what you want in your life. It's not what your sister wants or your dad wants. It's not what grandma wants for you or your friend. It's the thing that is going to fulfill you in your life and make you a happier person. And whatever that means, if that means that you're spending so much time on a passion project, or you're spending more time with the family, or if you're picking up and moving to a different country, great. But you have to get clear on what that vision looks like first. And once you have that vision, you can work backwards from there. So get clear on that vision, start there, and then work backwards and just see where that curiosity leads you. I know when I was getting started, I didn't know the first thing about investing in a retirement account or anything. In fact, I remember having a conversation with my supervisor at the time. I said, I don't know what I'm doing with retirement accounts. Can you give me some advice? And he said, well, no, I can't give you investing advice, but I would encourage you to look into it. And it's just one of those things where your own education is super important. So educate yourself, see where your curiosity leads you, and get clear on that vision for the future just to start out.
Got it. um, so you just said there's kind of multiple levels to financial independence. For you, it started with, hey, I got to get out from under these student loans.
Yep.
In your situation, after you got out from under the student loans, what made you keep going? A lot of people would say, whew, there we go. Now I can take the cruises that I want. I can buy. I was at one point in my life, I remember my wife and I, we got married so young and had kids, and we had no money. I made no money, and I was up for a promotion that literally doubled my salary. And so I remember getting the call. I still remember I was standing. This was back before cell phones, and I called home to check my answering machine, and my boss's boss had left me a voicemail saying, "Hey, you need to call me." So I called him, and he said, "We promoted you." And the first thing that popped into my head, I shit you not, was I can afford chips and salsa again. I'd gone 3 years without eating because I couldn't afford them. Like, we had two kids. You have to buy formula. You have to buy diapers. Chips and
Yeah.
salsa are a luxury. They're not necessary. But I
No.
remember that was the first thing that popped into my head. I've learned to aim a little higher since then, but I'm not kidding you. That was the first thing that popped into my head. But for you, you get done with the student loans. What made you keep going down this path? Like when you put together, did you rework your vision board at that point because that thing had been accomplished?
So yes and no. So there were other things on our vision board other than our student debt. After we had paid off the student debt, we took a picture of it and we celebrated. I'm trying to remember what we did. I think we went out to dinner and congratulated ourselves for a big accomplishment. And I do say that celebrations are a really important thing, especially when you're achieving big goals like that are just not a small thing to achieve. So we reworked our vision board a little bit, but some of the things that we had on there stayed, and they were still things that were important to us, things like experiences and growing our family. We wanted, I think at the time we had said we wanted to have at least one kid. So even things like that went on our vision board. So yes, there were financial pieces to it, and we did make some changes to it after that was done. But there were some of those other things that to this day are still on our vision board. Like we have this dream where one of these days we'd love to have this house. We've been in our house for 10 years, and although yes, we could afford a different house, it does come at a sacrifice. So we're not willing to sacrifice what's left of our goals for finances, for other things that we have in mind in favor of that house. Yet it's still something that's on our vision board, and it might be something that we decide to pursue at some point when we're happy with where we stand, whether finances or otherwise. So yes, we reworked our vision board, but it's one of those things that I still look at every day. We have it in our bedroom, so I walk past it every day and I see it. My kids have added some really fun colors and elements to it, so it's their vision board too. But it's still there, and it still really helps us drive forward with our ambitions and goals too.
Mm, nice. So what made you start the business? Like this went from something that you were passionate about, but now it's actually a business for you. And your website is fireyourcareer.com, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really started from that passion. And I realized I didn't fully answer your question before, so after we had paid off our student debt, I just felt this immense satisfaction, this relief, and we have so much more freedom. Sure, we could have spent more money on trips. We could have taken an extra trip a year, whatever. We could have done that. We were able to gain that kind of freedom, but I decided, we really decided, my husband and I decided that we were committed to this journey to fire, that we weren't done, that yes, we'd done a lot with it, but we saw the potential that was there. Sure, we could have said, okay, we're happy, we're good with just paying off student debt and then just moving on from there. But no, I saw that there was so much more potential beyond just that. And I wanted more of that. You could say that that experience was the thing that really bought me into the idea and got me really excited about it. And the reason why I started Fire Your Career is to make it more accessible to people, because I didn't do anything crazy or wild that anyone else couldn't have done in my situation. I found a way to refinance and consolidate our student loans. We found a way to earn some extra income through negotiating for our salaries and then taking on some extra jobs. And we found some ways, following really simple methods that anyone could do to pay that off. And I knew that by making this more accessible to more people, that it would have a profound impact on people's lives. And it does require a mindset shift. And that is one of the things that I aim to help people do with the website is, yes, make it more accessible, but explain that this is not something that everyone is doing. In fact, our society often celebrates debt, right? We celebrate success as, oh, that person bought a new car. Oh, they have a new house. And oh, they're going out to dinner every week. Wow, they must be really successful, right? That's what we see in our society as success. But true success is a lot quieter. It's putting money into investments. It's paying off that debt. It doesn't look flashy. It doesn't look pretty, but it gives you this level of freedom in your life that other people don't have. But yet we celebrate this other piece of it. We celebrate people getting that new car and that new house because that's what looks like success to us.
Mm. Yeah, I think lucky is the right way. Just even as a kid, material stuff never motivated me, and money actually doesn't motivate me. But what I've learned over the years, which does motivate me, is exactly what you're talking about. I like freedom. I can't remember. Oh, you know what? It's in the TV show Billions, where the lead character says at one point, "What's the point of having fuck you money if you never say fuck you?"
Oh,
And
I think I remember that. I've seen the show. I think I remember that scene. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, look, you guys that watch the podcast all the time know, I'm joking around on a lot of this stuff, but kind of, but not really. Um, the whole point is you get to choose what you want. The more money you have, the more choices you have. And one of the things I really like about Angela's message is even though her website is called Fire Your Career, you don't have to quit working. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to quit. Maybe you want to get a different job. Maybe you want to switch careers like she did and go from science to marketing. And that's a lot easier to do sitting on a big pile of cash where you don't have to worry about buying groceries next week, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's really what it's about. And yeah, with fire, it gives you that freedom of choice. And that's really what it's about. I have run into plenty of people that are very happy in their careers and cannot imagine retiring early. Yet things can change down the road. God forbid you get in an accident or something happens to you. These things happen. And if you're no longer able to work, if you've already been investing your energy and time into pursuing the fire movement, chances are you're going to have a lot more flexibility and freedom than someone that's been living at or even above their means. That person that's been living at or above their means is going to find themselves in probably some pretty hot water if they don't have disability, for instance. That's a tough situation to be in. And being part of the chronic illness community, I hear about a lot of those stories, and we don't expect those things to happen, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. And when you're preparing yourself with the fire movement, you give yourself that freedom of choice. Chances are that you may not have that happen, and hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but we can't plan for that. I had a cousin that was in an atrocious accident that nearly took her life. And, thankfully she's still with us, but she now, for the foreseeable future, is not able to work because she has a traumatic brain injury that she's still recovering from. So, how you can find yourself in these situations and not have a plan? And she didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't at fault for the accident. These things happen, though, and it doesn't have to be an accident. Maybe you find 5 years down the road that that job that was giving you this passion is just no longer uplifting you in the ways that it used to. And now you want to take a break. You can do that if you've been investing in the fire movement and if you've been putting time and attention into your goals. It is ultimately about having that freedom of choice.
Mm, love that. So, what does your business offer? How do you interact with customers? What do you provide for them?
Yeah, so really what I provide are tips and tricks on the website. So that's really the main thing is I publish weekly articles on the website. I always have new material to read. If you're just getting started for the very first time, I recommend starting on the Start Here page. I have all sorts of really focused resources depending on where you're at. So if you're really focused on building up your career, getting gains in your income, I would go to the career section. If you're focused on getting started with investing or you want to explore some different investing options, there's an investing section. There's also different sections for budgeting, for paying off debt, and all of those things. So that's really the main thing is just free resources that anyone can grab. In fact, one of the best ones to start with is I have a free ebook called 7 Ways to Fire Your Career. And it just gives you 7 simple ways that you can get started. It's not going to be something that is going to require a lot of work. It's just a guidebook that you can follow step by step. And you can focus on the thing that is uplifting you and exciting you the most. Maybe it is paying off debt, or maybe you're more excited about negotiating for an income increase, whatever that is. So those are some tips and tricks that will help you get started on that journey. So I offer all sorts of free resources that anyone can access at any point in time.
That's awesome. So the resources on your website are free?
They are. Yep.
Wow, that's really cool. Um, why do you think we as a country or a society do such a bad job both teaching and living financial literacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's really the question, right? Because when we get out of high school, or at least I know when I got out of high school, it's astounding what we don't know. Just
Mm,
the simple things that would have really helped us be more empowered with our finances. I think the reason why we do that is because we as a society, for one, prioritize other things. But then, if we're being honest, I think that certain industries benefit over that lack of knowledge. There are entire industries that profit quite considerably because of those that aren't great at paying off credit card debt and things like that, for instance. So I think that's a big question. That's a difficult one to answer. But I think that despite that, there are so many things that we can do to empower ourselves. And it starts with educating yourself and leaning into that curiosity and just being willing to learn a little bit more and not allowing yourself to be sucked into that mindset of living at your means and keeping up with the Joneses, whatever that looks like.
mm. What's your take on the state of colleges and student financial aid in the country right now? It's been kind of hotly debated for several years now. There's some groups that say, hey, we should forgive all this debt. There's some groups that say, hey, you signed up for it. You got to pay every penny. As someone who went through that whole process, how do you think about it now that you're on the other side of it?
Yeah, so I think a few things about that. So I have always been of the mindset of I am never going to wait for a handout. I'm not going to expect that. I never anticipated having that. Even my husband technically could have qualified for student loan forgiveness based on the work that he was doing, but we never wanted to wait for that. For one, we didn't trust that this is definitely going to happen, and I'm all the more grateful that we made the choices we made because there are plenty that I have heard of and that I know my husband knows that waited for that and it just never worked out. So what do you do then in that situation?
Mm.
So I've always been a fan of empower yourself. I mean, it's great if you can take advantage of that, but nothing is a guarantee, especially when it comes to the government. Um, I do think that student loans, in some senses, can be a bit of a trap. And I will say that having gone into this as an 18-year-old, you don't know what you're signing up for. You don't know that, okay, this student debt at this interest rate is going to mean that. What I'd always been led to believe by my counselors in high school when I was a student was that, well, you take on the student debt and then you graduate and you get a job and you pay it off. I mean, that's what I expected. And obviously there was a little bit more involved to it than that. Um, I do think that colleges have become a big profit center. I think that they have profited off of government loans and they want to attract students. So they invest in big things that they don't necessarily need to and don't necessarily make for better students or really better employees in the workforce. So I think as a whole, the system probably needs to be rebuilt or reviewed and changed. So that's my opinion. I think there are many things that don't work, but I find that that's the case with a lot of different industries and simply the world that we live in. So you just have to empower yourself to know how things work, educate yourself, and make sure you know what you're getting into. It's okay if you make some mistakes along the way. I've made my share of mistakes too, but
Same.
don't get stuck in your circumstances. Don't think, oh, it's the end of the world. I can't do anything about this. There's something you can do. It may not be the thing you want to do. I certainly didn't want to have to take a temp job when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, but there was, and there weren't any other jobs. So that's what I had to do. I've had to do those things that I didn't want to do. And sometimes that's what we have to do, but just move forward, take action, whatever small step that is, and hope that tomorrow is a better day. And I've had that same experience too with just dealing with my chronic illness. That there are days that are really awful that I don't want to deal with, but that's life sometimes. And it's tough
Right.
and not fun, but what are you going to do? Are you going to sit and twiddle your thumbs and say, oh, woe is me? Because that's an option. That is an option. And there are plenty of people that do that. Or are you going to make a different choice and empower yourself to live better, whatever that means? And it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to make a six-figure job overnight, but what small step can you take today that gets you one step closer to whatever that is?
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, I'm 53 and um so college used to be much more rare than it is now. Like it was not a foregone conclusion that you went to college when you graduated high school. And I feel like the government getting involved in that and pushing people towards college and this illusory, you can afford it. Well, no, a lot of people actually can't afford
Mm-hmm.
it, but the government made it very easy to get money by which to attend college. And then the colleges, like this is like my degree's in economics. And so just like a sidebar, like during COVID, I heard all these people saying, trust the science, trust the science. And I'm like, hey, I have to listen to all you fucking morons talk about economics when you know nothing about it. I'm not going to shut up because I don't have to be a doctor to know that what I'm seeing isn't making sense.
Uh-huh.
With that said, um, anytime that you increase the money supply but don't increase the pool of goods or services, it's going to cause inflation. That is
Yeah.
economics 101. It's like one of the first things you're taught in that course of study. And that's what we did with college is we greatly increased the money supply by which you could attend college, and we did not increase the supply. The way we did increase the supply was to allow a lot of these charlatan for-profit colleges that went out and started offering all these degrees that don't have a lot of use in the
Yep.
real world. And I can tell you as a business person, I don't give a shit what your degree is. Now, I'll caveat this with if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be an accountant, if you're going to be an attorney, and there's very specialized skills, you're a great example. If you're going to be a biologist, right? Those are very specialized skills that you do need to go to college for because there is no other way to acquire those skills. Totally
Yeah.
got it. In general, those fields offer jobs that more than make up for the debt you would have to take on to obtain those degrees. And I say in general because I know plenty of shitty attorneys that are swimming in debt because they're shitty attorneys. They might have
Yeah.
passed the bar, but that don't make them a good attorney. Um, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I deal with a lot of attorneys in my life for various reasons. But the whole point is the pendulum appears to be swinging now where most people seem to be recognizing, hey, college is not a panacea. It is not required, and it does not guarantee you good standing in life if
Yep.
you go to college. And I think there's a ton of value. And I appreciate, like you've talked about, hey, I didn't want to be a caterer. I got a degree in biology and I'm serving shit at parties. What the fuck's going on here? Right? I mean, I've been there. Like I've broken up concrete. I've cleaned up bathrooms that people have had, terrible flus in, and done really unfun stuff in my life. I'm not too good for it. I'm still not too good for it. If I had to go back to doing it to put food on the table, I would. And I think we have pushed for, just as a society, we've pushed for, and this fits exactly in with fire, which is why I'm on this long-winded diatribe here. Um, we have tried to make people comfortable all the time, and it's not good
Yeah.
to be comfortable all the
Yeah.
time. It's good to
Yeah.
be uncomfortable. And to me, that's a part of the fire mentality is you have to learn to say no. Hey, I could do
Yep.
that. I'm choosing not to. I'm putting myself in discomfort because the long-term payoff, the delayed gratification, which I will experience down the road, is much greater than the superficial gratification I would feel right now if I did X, Y, or Z, whatever X, Y, or Z is. So it'll be interesting to see where it shakes out. And then you add AI into that mix, and how many jobs will just go away because,
Yeah.
like you talked about computer programming. My bet is that job doesn't exist in 5 years, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting times for sure. You touched on a lot of points that I think are really good to discuss a little bit further. But one of those things is that, so regardless of whether you are a victim or a champion of your circumstances, you're right. You can be a victim. You can choose not to move forward, and you would be probably justified in not doing anything about it. But it's much harder. It's more uncomfortable. It's a lot more difficult to be a champion of your circumstances and say, no, I'm not going to just accept it for what it is, and I'm going to do something about it. That might be making an uncomfortable choice, making a decision that you don't feel great about, but is still something that moves you forward. Either way, you are correct, and you are the one that gets to define your life. You can be that victim and very likely be justified in that, or you can be that champion and decide that I'm going to live differently. I'm going to do differently. And to be successful with fire, you have to be that champion. You cannot be that victim. There will always be an excuse. And if you constantly make excuses for whatever it is, it's, I acquired this debt because of XYZ reason. You're probably right. And those decisions were probably valid. I had very valid decisions for accepting a car loan at 20% interest at the time. But
Right.
I didn't just say, okay, I'm going to live with it, and that's how it is, and continue to make those same choices. I did something about it. Same thing with my student loans. So you alone can make that decision for yourself and do something different about it. And either way, you're going to be right. And yes, the system is rigged. Yes, it works in favor for different people. That's not going to change. The world is unfair. That's just how it is. But that doesn't mean that you can't do something about your circumstances today.
Ooh, I'm all tingly. I love it. I love everything you just said. It's so good. And that's the entire point of our podcast is you should be pursuing something that's important to you. And if you're not, you're choosing to do that. So you at least need to be honest with yourself. And most of the time, when you force people to be honest with themselves about that particular subject, it will get them off the dime and say, wait, I don't actually want to live like this. And I tried to, like you just did. So you did such a great job of it. Yes, a lot of shitty stuff happened to you. Totally got it. I'm not denying any of that. I'm not denying that it sucked. I'm not denying that it was totally out of your control. I'm not denying that it was really, really shitty. Now, what are you going to do about it? You can't unring the bell. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. There is no, use whatever analogy that you want. It happened. What are you going to
Yeah.
do now? And that's one of the things that really resonates on the podcast. We've had a lot of people that come on and talk about really difficult subjects and really deep subjects. We've had people that were victims of sexual abuse as children, people have lost children to drug overdoses, to accidents. And it's what do you do from that point? How did you build a new life going forward? And I choose my words very carefully because it's not rebuild your life, because your life is fundamentally different now after that
Yeah.
terrible experience. But you don't get to just check out and not live. Some of these folks, like the lost kids, had other kids. You can't just give
Yeah.
up on your other kids. Like, I know it sucks. Like, the worst thing in the world that could have happened to you.
Hmm.
There's a podcast out there called Worst Club Ever, and it's for parents who've lost children. And I think it's great that there's a community so that people that have experienced that terrible thing have somewhere to go to talk about their experiences and what they've done to deal with those going forward. But you've got to own your shit. Like, because it's that simple to me. One of my favorite questions is, what are you doing about it? Like, someone
Hmm.
lays out all their problems, totally got it. Those are all valid. Now, what are you doing about it? Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's move on. Um, and I think I was fortunate. So I went through college on a baseball scholarship. So I got my school paid for through an athletic scholarship, which worked out really well for me, obviously. But it also taught me a ton of things. Playing baseball taught me a ton of things that transfer directly to life. And because I have people ask me a lot, how do you so quickly recover from bad news or refocus after something goes wrong? Because I'm pretty good at, okay, got it. It happened. Now what are we doing about it? And so I just explained the situation to him. So I played like the College World Series that you see on television. That's the level of baseball I played at. So, pretty big for not being professional.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't uncommon for me to play in front of 3,000, 4,000 people. And so I was a pitcher, so I'm standing out in the middle of the field and I'm involved in every play because I start it by throwing the ball. So if you throw a pitch and somebody hits it 450 feet over the fence, that is instant feedback. You did not do your job well. Like, there's no denying it. Everybody just saw it. There's 4,000 people screaming at you. The umpire will give you another baseball, and that guy is circling the bases. You get about 30 seconds to feel sorry for yourself, to figure out what you did wrong,
Uh-huh.
whatever. And then it's time to go again. And by the way, if you don't want to do it, there's 10 other guys on the team that do your job. And if you're not capable, they'll just come take you out. And all of a sudden, you don't have your job anymore. And
Yeah.
so you don't have the luxury of feeling sorry for yourself. You have to learn the lesson and you have to go back at it right now. And that's such a trivial thing. It's just a game. It doesn't really matter. But to get to that level, you got to take it real serious. You're lifting
Yeah.
weights and doing all the shit for years to get to that spot. And so you take it real serious when you're involved in it. But those lessons translate directly to life. Like in your example, so got it. You got diagnosed with Crohn's. What are you doing about it? Like, what can you do
Yeah.
about it now? Right. And that's the approach that you took. And that's what I love about your approach when you talk about fire is choose not to be a victim, choose to be a champion of your own life and take control of it, right?
That's right. Yeah, you really have to. If you dream of living a life on your terms, you have a certain vision for your future. You don't want to be a product of your circumstances. You have to be that champion. And I love the perspective that you shared about baseball. I've gained some valuable perspective with having Crohn's, and one of those things has been to understand what matters most to me. I've been able to really, so I've experienced hardship in the form of my health. And I've learned that when your health suffers, everything else suffers alongside it. So I've had to prioritize my health. I've had to do things that I didn't want to do, but it's given me some really valuable perspective. And that's to understand what matters most to me. And I realized that there were certain things at that time that I was doing in life that were just not well aligned with what I wanted for my future. So I made some changes. One of those changes that I didn't mention that I was living in upstate New York, and I decided that I was done with the winters. I didn't really want to live there anymore. So I actually made a change while I was in college and I transferred to a university in Oregon. And I've more or less stuck around in Oregon ever since. Now, that might be a big change or it might be a small change depending on your perspective. But it was a change that I made to really get myself to find this vision that I had for the future. And I was able to filter out the noise and the garbage that I knew that wasn't aiding me. I think often of people when they're elderly, what do they look back on their lives on and regret? In some senses, I've been able to gain that perspective with dealing with Crohn's because certain things are harder for me. I have to be really intentional with the things I'm doing versus not doing because otherwise I may have health struggles with that. So I've learned to walk away from relationships that at the time were really important to me, to say no to having toxic people in my life, to saying no to these opportunities that were not well aligned with who I was or who I wanted to be. And that perspective is incredibly valuable. So I would challenge anyone to think about, envision your life in the future when you're old. What are the things that you look back on that you are proud of, that you were excited to pursue, that lifted you up? And what are those things that potentially you regretted? Now, this is where I know it gets a little bit uncomfortable, but can you make the choice right now, wherever you're at, to say no to those things? And can you make the choice to focus on the things that you know are going to uplift your life and make you feel more fulfilled and happy? Those are the things that are worth pursuing. And anyone can get that perspective at any point, but you have to be willing to make that mindset shift to have that happen.
Oh, such good stuff. I love it. Um, we talk about like on your deathbed regrets a lot on this podcast because I think it's so informative. So there's been so many studies and thousands of people that work in palliative care have talked to other people. And these are folks that are around people in their last moments on earth. Like they know it's over. And these people are right there while it's happening. And they literally have never once talked about someone regretting an action they took and just wish they'd never taken it. What they all regret is actions they did not take or things they
Mhm.
did not do. I didn't spend enough time with my family. I didn't tell enough people how I really felt about them. I didn't have the courage to live the life I wanted instead of the life other people expected me to live. And there's been a lot of research done on why that is. And this makes a lot of sense to me. And look, I sell groceries for a living. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I didn't stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. None of those things. But like, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to understand this. If you take an action, there's an outcome. You might really like that outcome. You might hate that outcome, but there's an outcome. There's a finality to it at some point. If you don't take an action, then all of these various scenarios exist forever. And your mind kind of goes through those and plays those over and over again. So you've got this infinite universe of what ifs and what could have been that you can never bring to resolution because you never took your chance. You never took your shot. And that was why I liked to be my last 2 years in baseball, I was the closer. And, you know, that's the guy that comes in really close games and faces really good hitters. And that's an awesome job when it goes well. And it's a fucking shitty job when it don't. Because you walk to the bus all by yourself. But I wanted to be in control of my situation. Like win or lose, at least I knew I tried. You know, that was the
Mhm.
way I felt about it. And I wasn't by any means the best pitcher on those teams, but I was the right guy for that job because I was never afraid of it. Like I didn't go in and go, oh, what do I do? That's their best hitter and the bases are loaded. It was like, all right, here we go. Somebody's got to get him. It may as well be me. And
Yeah.
sometimes it went my way and sometimes it didn't go my way. Like
Yeah.
and it's not fun. It's not fun when it doesn't go your way. It's just not. But I don't regret a single minute of it. And even the ones that went terrible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to have that perspective. And it is hard to think about okay, what is this long ago future? We're so used to living in the moment, or in some cases, sometimes we live so much in the past. It can be hard to think about that future or think about the future that we want to have. We feel sad about the circumstances we're in, or we want to get out of a particular situation, but we only have the here and the now, the decisions that you can make right now to help you move in whatever step that is. And I think it is so important to have that perspective, have that vision that you want for your future, and be willing to take that action. Yeah, sometimes uncomfortable things happen. Sometimes you lose that game and you were the closer and you feel like you left you let your team down. And that might be, but there are also really exciting winnable moments. And if you're not that closer, you don't get to celebrate in the same way, right? You're the closer, so you get to be that champion that helped the team win that close game or whatever that is. So don't be afraid to put yourself in somewhat uncomfortable circumstances or to stretch the limits of what you're used to doing, because that's where true growth and opportunity happens. And it starts with being a little bit uncomfortable at times.
Mm, totally. And that's a great segue. I do want to talk about one more thing because you brought it up a couple times, salary negotiation. So talk about making people uncomfortable. Um, it's never made me I always say that's so I've been married to my wife for 32 years and I always tell people, I got her to marry me. And they're like, no, I'm like, I asked her. Like it's that basic. I asked her to marry me. That's how I got her to marry me. Um, and people don't want to have those conversations. They're so worried about getting rejected or being told no or things going
They're
bad.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. So talk a little bit about what your approach is to teach people about salary negotiation because it's so important.
It is. It is so important. So this is where a bit of the logic comes in first, but just some very foundational pieces of negotiation. There are two key things that are important to know. There's your BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiate agreement. Really, what that means, each side has a BATNA. So if, for instance, you are negotiating a salary for a new job, your BATNA, your best alternative, if the negotiations fall through, might be to either stay at your current job or maybe you have another job offer and you could take that job offer instead. So that's one side of that. The other side of that is, what is the employer's BATNA? So they have you earning this salary, they're paying whatever salary that is. If those negotiations fall through, maybe they go to a different candidate, or maybe the candidate pool is so narrow or they're so intent on only having you as a candidate that their BATNA is weaker than yours by comparison. It helps to understand where each side stands in negotiations so that you know how much flexibility and wiggle room you have or don't have. So that's one thing. The other thing that's important to note is ZOPA. It's the zone of possible agreement. So your employer, your potential future employer, has some number in mind. Let's just make up some numbers. Maybe this job that you're applying for, they would be happy paying anywhere between 80 to 100 grand. So that is their zone of possible agreement. If you negotiate for something around that, they'll probably say yes. Your ZOPA, maybe you feel like you're more proficient at the job, or maybe you feel like you're more deserving of a higher salary. Maybe your ZOPA is 90 to 120. So your zone of possible agreement then is going to be that 90 to 100. That's where you're going to have some overlap. So those are some of the foundational pieces of negotiation. So it's important to know where you stand with negotiations. It's also really important to approach negotiations as it's not a battle. It really starts as a conversation. It's just understanding each side, and there are very simple things that you can use to ground your negotiation tactics in that are very favorable towards the employer. You can just some really simple things, and I have a whole article that talks about more of the specifics of this, but some simple things you can do, like say, I'm excited about this position and based on these skills, I think that's well aligned with what you're looking for. And based on where I'm at in my career and with a specific opportunity, I would like to request this salary, whatever it is, assuming they probably already gave you an offer. Usually then you can counter their offer with one of your own. So that's really how it works. And it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. I know it's uncomfortable to ask, but you will never get what you don't ask for. If you don't ask for a salary increase, you'll just take what they give you. And maybe that's enough, and maybe you're satisfied with that. In which case, okay, maybe that's fine. But if you choose not to negotiate, then you're potentially leaving money on the table. The other thing I want to point out too is that it is completely possible, and I have done this too, it is completely possible to negotiate for things other than just your salary. That's usually where people start, but you can negotiate for more paid time off, for more holidays. One of the things I included with my salary negotiations that was really important for me was I negotiated for a reasonable accommodation for my disability with having Crohn's. And that was, again, another kind of uncomfortable thing to broach, but I knew that I was doing the right thing for both myself and really for my employer. Because if you think about it, by asking for what I needed and getting that, or finding some version of success in that, they're getting someone who is going to be more committed, me. I'm going to be more excited about the opportunity because it's better aligned with what I'm looking for. And the employer is going to have a very committed employee that's very excited, and is the position is going to be aligned in a better way that I could do the job better. So it's a win-win all around. And that's really what it is when it comes to negotiations. It's ideally a win-win. That doesn't mean that you can't walk away. You could decide to walk away. Maybe the salary doesn't meet your expectations and you have a different job offer. Or maybe you're happy staying with your current job until something else comes around. And maybe that for the employer, they just go with a different candidate. So negotiations don't need to be a big, scary thing. Start simply, understand where you stand, and just start with a conversation. It can actually be more simple than you might realize.
Oh, good stuff. So I've negotiated a lot of stuff in my career. Some of it small, some of it massive. Like I'll negotiate a McDonald's. I don't give a shit. Like it never hurts to ask. Like, hey, you got anything that nobody bought? You got something going stale back there? I'll buy it for 50 cents. I don't care. Fine with me. All they can do is tell me no, like whatever.
Right?
But people say I'm so uncomfortable in negotiations. I'm like, I don't think you understand what negotiations are. I'm like, do you have kids? And they're like, yes. I'm like, you negotiate every day. You just don't know you're in a negotiation.
Uh-huh.
Like, are you in a relationship? Yeah. Well, then you negotiate every day. You just haven't
Yep.
recognized that you're in a negotiation.
Yep.
Um, they try to make it this, like you talked about, scary, formal, whatever, are yelling at each other over a table. That's not it at all. In fact, that's
No.
not a good negotiation in any way, shape, or form. But you need to be prepared, like you just talked about. You need to have some idea of what you're trying to accomplish before you go in there. And then I always try to, I've heard it said both ways. A good negotiation is where everybody walks away a little bit happy, or everyone walks away a little bit disappointed.
Yep.
Um, and that's your, zone of agreement that you were talking about earlier. But if I know what's important to me and I know what's important to them, I can usually find some common ground.
Yep.
And yeah, like the whole salary negotiation. I did exactly what you were talking about too. When I took a job with the grocery wholesaler that I worked at, where I ran the private label. I started off there as a buyer, and the company I was leaving, I'd been there for 10 years, and I was just approaching 4 weeks of vacation. My wife and I have three sons. They're grown now, but they were young at the time. I want to say they were, what were they, 8, 5, and 3, or something like that. And so the vacation time was important to me, especially at that stage in their lives. And this company had like a strict policy. It was, you get 2 weeks, you get 2 weeks, you get 2 weeks. And I say that 4 times because I went back to him 4 times. And I'm like, I need more vacation. Like, I want to come work for you. Like, I'm going to grind. I'm going to do a great job for you. But like, I've got young kids. I'm moving my family
Yeah.
across the country. I don't know a fucking person west of Denver, Colorado, or east of Denver, Colorado. I'm going to be 3,000 miles away from everyone I know. My wife's going to need help because she was staying at home raising the kids. I couldn't get them to budge. They actually paid me like 15 grand more to get me over the vacation hump. But I kept asking, and they finally said, we just can't do anymore. And I said, totally got it. I said, I appreciate you at least entertaining the conversation. They said, look, we're hiring you for a position that's like heavy on negotiation. So like you aced the test. Like, you kept pushing and kept pushing and you got as much as you could out of us. I said, no, I get it. I appreciate your perspective and I'm glad that you're impressed, but that's not what I was doing. This was about time with my kids. That's what this was about to me, you know?
Uh,
Um, but like you can't be afraid to ask those things. And if you do it in a way, the way I try to explain it to people is there's ways to do those things constructively and there's ways to do those things destructively. And you should always choose constructively. It's
right.
like, it's like the same thing I tell people in relationships. Like if someone says something and it can be interpreted in one of two ways, and one way is really bad and one way is really good, always assume the really good one until you can verify that it's the bad one. Don't go to the negative one and create friction where there doesn't need to be friction. Assume I meant it well. Like, I'm important to you. Like, why would I think bad things or try to intentionally do bad things? But
Yeah.
yeah, the negotiation part's so important. I love that you teach that to people and emphasize that with people as well, because right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of companies will gauge your next salary based on your current salary. So
Yeah.
if you can keep moving, I don't think that's right, but it's what they do. And
Yeah.
if you can keep that escalating, it's exponentially more money over the course of your career.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And I like the point too that you made too that negotiations aren't just what you would typically do. They're not necessarily a formal setting between an employee and employer, for instance. You negotiate with your spouse with who's taking out the trash tonight. And yeah, those things they seem like simple conversations, but usually there's a give on the side of each party. So if you're the one taking out the trash, is your partner then emptying out the dishwasher? Are they doing something else? Or maybe they're taking care of the kids. We do these negotiations all the time without even really thinking about it. So it's just really what it is it's feeling okay with being a little bit uncomfortable. One of the things that I know my husband does on a routine basis is every 6 months or so, they like to raise our cable bill, which is or not our internet bill. We don't have cable anymore. But
Right.
anyways, right. It's on like this cycle. And so every 6 months he calls and says, hey, you raised our bill. What can we do to lower it? And usually he doesn't have to do very much, but they just lower it when he gets on the call. So sometimes it's just showing up and asking and not being afraid to reach out. And it's annoying to have to make that phone call. It takes time out of the day, but we can save whatever it is, $20 a month that we would otherwise be wasting if we just didn't say anything. And that's what they anticipate. Most people don't say anything. They don't ask for a bit of a break, so they don't get one. So like I said before, you never get what you don't ask for. So don't be afraid to just ask. You never know what might work out.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So one of the things I try to do in all my conversations, I ask a lot of questions. We cover a lot of territory. I feel like we do a good job of sussing out a lot of stuff, but I'm certainly not perfect. I always tell people I don't throw stones because I live in a glass house. Um, is there any questions I have not asked you or any topics that we haven't talked about yet that you think are important for us or you feel strongly about that you want to talk about while we're in front of the audience?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit, but touching on the point about the chronic illness and really empowering yourself. So something I want to explain to people too is that it's tough when you're living with a chronic health condition and having been through this journey and this experience. There are times where you might need to put certain things on pause to recover your health or get in a good place with treatment schedule or whatever that is. And what I would encourage people to remember is that setbacks are inevitable at times, whether it's a chronic illness or it's something else. It's not something to feel ashamed of. It's just a refocus of your energy and your intention. And it's the thing that tells you that you got to focus on this right now. And I know this is something that's hard for me personally because I've always been a very ambitious and goal driven person. That said, I've had to take pauses with certain things to say, okay, I'm not doing great right now. I need to revisit and reflect on this. That doesn't mean that I'm not making progress. It just means that there's a bit of a roadblock right now, and I need to address this issue right now. And it's not something to feel ashamed of. It doesn't mean that you can't pick up your journey where you left off, but don't let that go. Don't let yourself lose that steam. You pick that back up when you get the chance, and don't be afraid to make whatever choices you can. Sometimes when it comes to your health, especially, you might have to spend more time and energy on that than you want, but the rest of your goals can be revisited and you can come back to them when it's the right time for it again.
Oh, great call out. Yeah, great call out. Love that. And like you talked about, like kind of reworking your vision board a little bit. You got to do that same thing with your life every once in a while, right? Your
Yeah.
life changes
Yep.
when you switch careers.
Right.
And in your case, it changed dramatically when you got your diagnosis. And they're like, okay, now I know what is driving this, and it's not going to go away on its own. And so you got to do what you got to do. And there's nothing more important than your health. You can't help other. It's kind of like on the
Yep.
airplane when they tell you, hey, put your oxygen mask on before you help somebody else because you can't
Right.
help anyone if you pass out because you're not getting oxygen.
Yeah. 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 Agreed. It's one of those things that isn't as fun to work on. I know that I would much rather focus on the goals that excite me, but you get those roadblocks. Like I said before, life has a way of throwing curveballs and things that you can't anticipate, and you just have to address those things when you can. But don't just allow yourself to be a product of your circumstances. Just empower yourself and do whatever you need to do to take that step forward, whatever that looks like in your life.
Mm, love that. And Angela's a testament to it. Look at the life she's built for herself because she took action, because she attacked the things that were difficult, because she didn't run from them. She ran towards them and said, I'm going to figure this out. So, absolutely love it. With that said, you could benefit a lot by heading over to her website, Fire Your Career. And just really appreciate you coming on the show, Angela. You did a great job.
Thanks, Joe. It's been great to be here and love the questions you asked.
every once in a while, people like them. A lot of times it's, yeah, we don't do any gotcha stuff or anything, but sometimes the topics are heavy, but your topic's awesome. I just love your message and your delivery of the message of personal responsibility and personal accountability and building the life that you want. I just think it's so important. I'm glad that there's people out there in the world like you that are kind of preaching that and helping people to get there. So, for all of you, you won't have to go far. We'll put a link to Angela so you can get in touch with her and check out her website in the show notes. So you don't have to go searching for it. Just go down to the show notes. You can click on it right there. So thank you so much, Angela. Really, really enjoyed our conversation. Really appreciate having you on the podcast.
It was great to talk to you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great Labor Day weekend.
You too.
All right. Okay, guys, there you go. So, as advertised, Angela is money. Literally, she's about money and she is money. What a great job by her. I love her approach. It's no nonsense. It's helpful. It's super positive while being very realistic. And what a great job she did. Just really, really glad we were able to get her on the podcast. So, like we talked about, don't forget, head over to our website, fireyourcareer.com, and start educating yourself on financial literacy and taking control of your financial situation and building the life that you want. She's a testament to it. She's sharing all the things that she has learned and just did an awesome job. Really glad to have her on the podcast and really appreciate her spending that time with us. So James puts it up every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All the podcast episodes are there. Links to all the social media accounts are there. We publish a newsletter every weekday. You can subscribe to there. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast, whatever platform you consume it on. We're going to keep having awesome guests like Angela on and all of our other guests. They have such great information. They're so willing to share and help you build the life that you want. You don't want to miss any of them because they're awesome. They do an awesome job, and we're very lucky to have them on the podcast. We have them on here for you so you can build the life that you want. Make sure you catch our next episode. We will see you there.